Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here alongside Matt Sloane and John Apkarian. Matt and John, good morning. How you both doing?
Doing great. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning. Doing great.
Matt, Matt, where are you located today?
Today I am in Ocean City, New Jersey. Not my usual stomping grounds.
It's not a bad place to be. That's a good early summertime trip.
It is. It is. Got the kids with me, so we're having a blast on the beach.
John, what about yourself?
I'm in Bama.
Roll Tide.
Yep.
Have you lived in Alabama long enough to pick your team yet?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
I'm still an
Or does the team
NFL guy.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
or does the team pick you?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I think what
That's what the
happens
pod.
is what happens is you vote for the team where most of your neighbors are voting for.
Right.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it could
Otherwise, yeah,
be
if you put the wrong flag out, it could be a problem.
real bad.
Yeah.
Besides Alabama football, which is one thing that maybe brings us together, drones is something that is a linchpin between the three of us. And Matt, I remember you coming to Darley in 20, maybe 14 or so. You were the kind of the early days of Skyfire, and you were, some of the early pioneer of doing a lot of the part one, applying for different certifications and licenses for customers and kind of collaborating with Darley in the early time then. But kind of to start from you, just a little bit of history of kind of like how you got into drones, your role, with Skyfire and sort of where Skyfire is today. And then we'll get to John after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure to see both of you guys. Yeah, I was a journalist before I started this the predecessor company, and I spent 15 years at CNN covering medical news stories. And one of the things that I had gotten really towards the end of my time at CNN was a drone. I was covering some people doing triathlon, and so I wanted to get some video of the swimming part of it, and that's really hard to do, obviously, with a regular camera. So I got this flying camera, and really like I had left CNN full time, and but I was still kind of freelancing. And somebody had asked me, "Hey, can you go meet with these firefighters and talk to them about how they might run into the media, how you guys cover major news stories?" And so I said, "Yeah, no, absolutely." So I brought my drone. And I said, "I just got this thing." It was literally the day before. I was like, "I just got this thing yesterday, and now we've got these flying cameras to annoy you with on fire scenes." And they were like, "Wait a minute, we might be able to use this on the fire ground. So, how do we do this for our department?" And I was like, I have no idea, but I'll figure it out and get back to you. And that was almost 11 years ago now. So that's how I got started. And then, in that time spent, we've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of, fire departments, police departments, federal law enforcement, DOD, just on how to incorporate this technology into your everyday.
What do you do with this drone? I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
That's literally how it started. Yeah.
That's a great way to start a business.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it turned out it was a good move. So, it could have been a bad move too. But it was the light bulb moment that just got me to realize, hey, there's really something here. And like you said, that was early days of the drone industry. So we were all just making it up as we went along, trying to figure it out. And I'd say we did because we're still here 11 years later.
Yeah. And so before we get into the 2025 story, throw it to you, John. What was your sort of journey into drones? You've had your own drone journey for quite some time and now leading drone efforts at Darley. Give us a little insight under the hood here.
Sure. So I think it was around 2016 I first started becoming interested in drones and drone technology. For all of my life, I've always wanted to be a pilot. And so uh, and I haven't come up with any real good reason to invest in the money to get my private pilot's license to convince my wife that I should. So I live vicariously through behind the sticks and flying drones in order to kind of satiate my appetite for aircraft and aviation and that sort of thing. But it was around 2016 I started flying drones just on my own. Wanted to get more involved in the technology, learn as much as I could, and then kind of transitioned over a professional career. Professionally, I was involved in counter UAS technology, so RF, electro-optical, radar, those types of things, and did that for several years. And then an opportunity came up to lead the charge at Darley to really come up with a very sound and kind of leading edge drone technology that we can offer to our clients, and which of most of which are police and firefighting community, but also on the DoD and the federal side as well. So kind of it's been an evolution, but I absolutely love the industry. It's a burgeoning industry, and it's changing almost every day. But the bottom line is that it's technology that we can provide, Darley can provide, to help people become safer while being able to expand the technology in the drone space for other areas, whether it be delivery of goods or medical supplies or what have you. It's just the no pun intended, but the sky's the limit. And I love being part of this technology that is really shaping the way that we go about firefighting and law enforcement and search and rescue and those types of things.
And I think all three of us know that it's actually in a lot of ways easy to buy a drone, but there's a lot in terms of going through, well, how do you extract value out of it? How do you really use it? And how do you really make sure you're buying the right one that's going to actually bring the best ROI that you're spending taxpayer dollars on? And that's one of the challenges with public safety. With there's so many options out there, you don't really know where to start. And frankly, sometimes there's also the evolving policy and political challenges in terms of what you can and cannot buy. And that's probably for a separate conversation. But one in particular is just like the dynamic and the rise of drone as a first responder and DFR. And that's something that Darley and Skyfire AI have partnered on. And in particular with Rise DFR Village is something I want to dive into. It's sort of helping provide this platform to allow people to touch, feel, test, try, learn about the different nuances of drones. So Matt, maybe throw it to you first. Like what inspired the creation of Rise DFR Village, and how does it differ from other drone training or test facilities?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I mean, you said it, right? I mean, it's hard to figure out what's good and what's bad and which drone, do I use? And the answer, there isn't a simple answer to that question, right? I mean, the best drone is the one that is the right one for the tool. Sorry, sorry, completely screwed that up.
I've heard you say that before. The best drone is the one that you have. Is that quote?
A photographer once told me that the best camera is the one you have with you. So you don't need the biggest, fanciest thing at all times. If you need to capture the shot and you have a camera with you, that's the best camera at that moment. And it's very similar with the drone stuff too. I mean, the best drone is the one you have with you. And it really just depends on which mission you're after. So, if you want to do an indoor tactical mission, having a giant outdoor ISR drone is not the right tool, right? I mean, bigger is not better in that case. You need something tiny. You need something that's going to be able to navigate inside. Similarly, if you have a small indoor drone, you're not going to go put it up to 400 feet when it's 20 knot winds outside. And so, the answer to the question, which drone should I buy, it's not an easy answer. It's a very complex conversation. And so that is the reason for the DFR Village. It's the reason that Skyfire exists. In some ways, it's the reason that Darley's drone division exists, because we all hear from the manufacturers all the time, and this is not a knock against them. That's their job, right? Their job is to say, if you're Skydio and you're doing direct sales, you say like the Skydio product is the best thing on the market. If you're Brink and you do direct sales, the Brink thing is the best thing on the market, and love both of those guys, not a knock on them. But how do I know that, right? I got to test it. I've got to see it. I've got to compare it to other things, and I've got to make sure that it's the right tool for the job that I have to do. And so that's what the idea behind the Village was: have a place where you can come out and test Skydio and Brink and Teal and Parrot and DJI and Autel and everything, right? And we don't want to shy away from any of those manufacturers, because it, depending on your ability to buy one versus the other, it's a different calculus for every agency. So that way you come out to the DFR Village, you get to try all the different drones, all the different software options, all the different drones in a box, look at the different sensors in a real world environment. So we have a 2,200 acre facility in Huntsville. It's actually owned by the Huntsville International Airport. It's their property. So that in and of itself is unique to have a drone testing facility at an airport. But it's really a testament to our relationship with the FAA and with Huntsville Airport that we can do this. We can operate in harmony together. So it's 2,200 acres. We're in the process of building out, various scenario based opportunities for people to fly in. So, we've had 2 school buses donated to us that we're working on incorporating. We've got, crashed cars and search and rescue scenarios and indoor scenarios at the building that we occupy there. So, lots of different ways that you can test it out. And the whole point is, as an agency, I got to get out there and I got to test all the things to do the job that I needed to do. So you go out there, we simulate that for you, and you can come test it. And it's all free for the end user. So, all of the OEMs that support us, either the companies directly or through our partnership with you guys at Darley, is, we have all the equipment there. They've supplied all that so that you can come out and really get your hands on it. It's like a permanent trade show, but where you can actually fly stuff. So
I
that
love
was the
that.
goal.
And John, to kind of add on that, I mean, with Darley's partnership with the Village, I mean, can you tell me more about some of the hardware and software and different technologies that are tested and how they're tailored for some of these public safety operations?
Sure. Yeah. And just to echo what Matt was saying, we want to be able to provide as many platforms as possible. There's no Swiss Army knife out there in terms of a drone that can do everything, as Matt mentioned. And so what we want to do is we want to provide a safe environment to fly these drones. And Darley, for our part, we're providing the drone platforms for agencies to come out and test. Platforms that include both NDAA and Blue cleared US manufactured drones, as well as other manufacturers that, today they're still able to fly. But it's important that we provide as many drone platforms as possible so that these agencies can make an educated decision on what to invest in. And so we provide everything from dark hive drones to Parrot, Autel, Census Technology, as Matt mentioned, Teal, FlightWave, a whole depth and breadth of different types of drone manufacturers. As far as Darley's concerned, what our main focus is not only providing a wide range of different drone platforms for agencies to fly and test, but we're really focused on the U.S. manufactured drone technology. So those drones that are NDA compliant, that are Blue cleared, and at the end of the day, we want to be able to drive as much awareness that these U.S. manufacturers are really coming up to speed with their technology and their capabilities. And as we move, in some cases, away from, let's say, Chinese manufactured drones, Darley wants to be in a position to kind of fill that space with capable leading edge US manufactured drone technology. And so we're really focused on that, but we don't want to take away from any of the traditional drone platforms that are out there, because there's lots of agencies that are still using other drone platforms, namely DJI and Autel. So we are really focused on listening to what the agencies need and then recommending those drone platforms that will help them not just meet their mission, but they're able to actually grow into the technology where it's not going to be obsolete in 6 months or a year or so. So it's really important that we listen to what the needs are of these agencies and then provide them those drone platforms that are going to meet those and exceed those mission requirements.
Super helpful context. Thank you both. And I think just as you were both talking, and I'm thinking about the whole name of Rise DFR, we've talked about a range of drones, but now I want to dive into a little bit more of DFR, drone as a first responder. I think it's been this new wave of drone application in the past few years. I remember Chula Vista sort of being like the initial pioneer, and now there's different nuances of DFR, whether it's radar, whether it's line of sight, or whether, again, you both could speak about it more eloquently than myself. But Matt, to start with you and John afterwards, like how would you define drone as a first responder, and why is it more than just first on scene?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, typically and historically, DFR has been a term, I don't know if it was created in Chula Vista. I think it was created around, that whole time period. It probably was created in Chula Vista, but, it was created as a law enforcement response tool. And, I think that we have gotten so hyper-focused on the law enforcement piece of it that, we kind of need to look at the broader context. So to answer your question, I think the idea of a drone as a first responder is just that. It's just the drone getting there before the first human being. That could be for law enforcement purposes. It could also be for fire rescue purposes. I mean, we talk to so many fire agencies who say, the one time we never get the drone out of the box is during active house fires, because we're all so busy, and or active structure fires, we're all so busy, we're pulling hose and we're getting guys inside the houses and whatever, and that's the one time it could be the most useful, right? And so if you had somebody who was placed remotely, whose job it was just to fly the drone and get better data to those firefighters, that could be literally a life-saving tool for them. We haven't really even scratched the surface at all about, EMS use. So how do we put, drones in the air that have defibrillators, that have EpiPens and Narcan and things like that? And, we are starting to work on a couple of those things now. But It's a really exciting time for the drone industry, because as the drones are getting better, as they fly longer distances, as we get more FAA permissions, there's a whole lot more we can do than just put a camera in the sky. That's a lot of words to say. We basically, try to get the drone there before the first in responder. The benefit of doing that is quick response times, average 2 to 3 minutes, we can be on scene. If you've ever called 911 before, getting any response within 2 to 3 minutes is like unheard of, especially if you're in rural areas. And so, just having eyes on, knowing exactly what those officers, firefighters, EMTs are walking into is super helpful for them. And so that's the goal. So rather than having a responder actually drive it to a scene, take some 5 to 7 minutes to get there, get it out of the box, get it up. Also trying to do jobs on scene. Our whole job is, hey, we take the drone piece of it over for you. We fly it to the scene. You do you on the ground. We'll get you the information you need from the air.
John, what else would you add to the DFR definition scope conversation?
Yeah, I think Matt summed it up well. I always go back to the idea that drones are not toys anymore. They once were, but drones have become a critical tool in all different agencies, whether it's law enforcement, firefighting, EMS, search and rescue, ISR. It's really a tool that has, again, I see drones as a way to help with ensuring people are safe, right? And so I see DFR as, as Matt said, but I see DFR as getting out there first, getting that situational awareness, understanding where the danger zones are, where the goes, where, go, no go locations are, and being able to transmit that information to the boots on the ground so that they're not going into harm's way, or at least providing them some options to help them in their particular mission and what they're trying to accomplish. The other thing about DFR is that we're moving to a situation where there's still human intervention, but there's lots of automation and AI that's built into this, and it's going to get even more. I don't want to say technical, but it's going to be more automated, I guess, in the sense that you're going to be able to call 911. 911 is going to make that determination, send that information over to somebody who's going to be launching that drone, getting out to the scene, and doing it quickly and safely. So I think DFR is still in its infancy, but a lot of agencies are understanding the benefits of utilizing drone technology to get on the scene quick and to provide an additional layer of safety for those boots on the ground that are actually going to that, that incident or that operation. So, whether or not that's a good answer or not, that's the way I see DFR is really helping to ensure the safety of those law enforcement, firefighters, and other agencies, to give them that situational awareness before they get into a dangerous situation or ultimately walking into a dangerous situation.
Well, it's exciting and interesting to think about how, again, this piece of flying plastic is now being deployed in another operational context, which is awesome. But then I think about one of my favorite movies is Catch Me If You Can. And there's that whole dynamic of there's always kind of the cat and mouse game. And as something else comes on, there's now the way of the bad guy doing something with it. And as great as drones are, they're also what happens if they get in the hands of the bad person. And I know there's great as much as there's been a focus into drones and DFR. On the counter, there's been all this conversation and the rise of counter UAS and detect and avoid technologies and different nuances within drone tech, but particularly with counter UAS, which is sort of the counter, the other side of how to deal with the drones. What is counter UAS tech? How is that something that ties into the whole narrative here that public safety needs to consider? How do we learn and train about it? Matt, I'll throw that to you first.
Yeah, well, first of all, before we dive into that, it's important to note that counter UAS tech is really the same as airspace awareness tech. And so that's absolutely critical for DFR. Like as we're flying 2 miles downrange without actually seeing the drone, we need to be aware of what else is in the airspace. And so that could be other airplanes, helicopters, other drones. And so we've really, had a lot of conversation about airspace awareness. How do we see what's out there? Which at the same time can be useful as a counter drone technology. So it's important to kind of make that's both the distinction and also it's exactly the same thing, just with a different purpose. On the counter UAS side, yeah, it's absolutely critical. I mean, it feels weird to talk about like shooting drones out of the sky when what we do for a living is put drones into the sky, but the difference is who's flying them and the intent. It's just as scary to us as UAS operators. to know that there are people out there who are trying to, ruin this for all of us. And in addition to hurting people and doing things they're not supposed to be doing. So we see the value in it, in our organization. It's we are really, like, if we are on the cutting edge of drones, I mean, we are before the cutting edge on counter UAS technology. I mean, we have not even begun to scratch the surface. Much like every other technology, DoD has been doing a great job of this for a long time, but it's just now really trickling down to us. But things like, how do we make sure that people don't fly drones over prisons and drop stuff? How do we make sure that people don't fly drones over electrical substations and blow them up, or over, Major League Baseball games? And so all of those things are really concerning to us. And so we're all looking at technologies like radar, like optical cameras, like acoustic sensors, passive detection, active mitigation, and where that all factors into this new environment of having drones flying above us at all times. I can say, from a legal standpoint, it's a really unsettled area right now. I mean, the only agencies in the country that have the ability to actually mitigate drones or take them out of the sky are the Department of Justice, the Department of Energy over their sites, like nuclear sites, and then Department of Defense over their sites. But the state police doesn't have that authority. Local police certainly doesn't, which is good and bad, right? It's good because we can. In some cases, we go out and do these trainings, and you're like, I'm not sure that drones are a great idea for these guys. Certainly, the ability to shoot them down is maybe not a great idea for some agencies.
What about the regular John Doe standing in his
And that
backyard
too,
with
right?
a shotgun?
I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a great YouTube video about Johnny Drone Hunter. And it's like this dude on a Harley, and he, leather and everything. He pulls up and he's got this like giant bazooka looking thing that's like a anti-drone cannon. That came out years and years ago. So yeah, we don't want that technology to proliferate too far, but we do want to be able to protect our prisons and our stadiums, our critical infrastructure sites and things like that. So there's a lot of ongoing conversation in Washington right now about who should have that authority, how does it get delegated, how do we train people. It's very similar to the model that the FBI has used for the bomb techs. So it used to be that all bomb techs were FBI employees. Now you can have local bomb teams, but they all have to be trained by the FBI. And so they're looking at sort of a similar model to that for the drone counter drone technology.
John, what other counter UAS conversation in any tech particular that Darley is offering? And obviously, John or Matt, you mentioned it's a little slippery slope, but from some of the detection and counter UAS, what's your 2 cents on it all?
So, so along with providing leading edge drone technology, we realize the importance, and I've realized this when I was in the industry, but we realize the importance of airspace deconfliction, right? And so having that situational awareness of other aircraft in the airspace that you're working in is critical. And we're finding that a lot of our drone detection platforms that we offer are being used in circumstances like public, where there's for public safety, where there's events and lots of individuals congregating in certain area. Think concerts, like Matt said, baseball games or football games or sporting events and things like that. But an interesting thing is a lot of our drone technology or drone detection technology now is being used in the firefighting community, especially with wildfires, because I always used to use a term, the 3 C's, right? So there's careless, clueless, and criminal that sometimes are flying these drones. And the clueless and the careless are sometimes the ones that are flying over, let's say, wildfires to try to get those great videos or photos, while there's air tankers in the air trying to extinguish those fires. And so being able to use drone detection to identify where these drones are, where the pilot is located, so you can have a conversation with those folks and educate them, but being able to understand what's in your airspace while you're trying to accomplish your particular mission, whether it's putting out a fire, protecting communities or events or sporting events or what have you, is really, really important. And so that's why we've decided to choose some really good leading edge drone detection technology that incorporates a lot of the different sort of sensor fusion, meaning it fuses all of these different types of sensors that Matt mentioned: radar, cameras, acoustic, and really in passive RF, and really blend those together to provide that identification of those aircraft or those drones that shouldn't be in that airspace, or could pose a danger to be in that airspace at that time. So we recognize that, and it's really a critical part of your overall, I guess, drone program, especially when you're dealing with public safety.
You both mentioned the dynamic of needing to protect infrastructure and continue to empower first responders to do their job more effectively. And there's this combination of DFR and counter UAS, and it's sort of the pulling these levers here. But from both of your experiences, what are any surprising or impactful learning lessons that have come from the real world DFR or counter UAS simulations and exercises at the Rise Village so far, or any that are coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're learning stuff every single day. We operate a couple of DFR programs. One in particular that we're very active in is Huntsville, Alabama, where I'm based, and John's not far from there. And we're learning so much every single day that we're operating this program. I mean, we've been consulting on programs like this since 2018 now, but this is now that we're actually operating these programs, I mean, the learning that we're getting from every call, from every deployment has been incredible. We're very excited. You may have seen the news that we're about to launch Birmingham's DFR program. That's going to be, significantly larger footprint, 16 drone docks placed all over the city. And so we're applying those lessons. But I mean, look, I think, one of the things that we're learning really quickly is not every call is worth going to, but we learn something on every single call, right? So, we started out going to every, check door, check auto, check alarm, every traffic stop, and, starting to find like, well, you know what? Sometimes those traffic stops go bad pretty quick. And so where it may just be a, little old lady who gets pulled over for driving too slow or too fast or erratically, it could also be a criminal who doesn't want to be arrested, and then they take off running through the woods. So we've had that happen a couple of times. So one of the things we've learned is, if we can get there, we should go. Obviously, if we have a higher priority call, we can divert en route, and we do that a lot. Also, things that seem uninteresting quickly become interesting. There was a really interesting case where some teenager had wandered away from like a group living facility, and we were just helping try and find him, and then it turned into he had an altercation with an officer, and ended up it was like beating this guy up on the side of the highway. And so either one of them could have gotten hit by a car. One could have gotten the kid could have gotten the officer's gun. I mean, anything could have happened. We got there quickly. We identified where they were. We directed other resources there quickly, and everybody went home safely, both the kid and the officer. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to de-escalate, we're trying to diffuse. We hear a report that somebody's got a gun in a park. Maybe it turns out to just be a kid, and we'd like to know that before the officers come in guns blazing. So those are the kinds of things that we're finding almost once a week. We're either saving a life or we're preventing a really bad situation from happening. So that's been really, really cool.
Some of your messaging reminds me of the famous Will Ferrell from Flint Tropics, and of can we all just get along? Everybody love everybody.
Hey man, that's what we're striving for, right? That's why we're trying to get people to follow the law, so we can all just do our thing.
Yeah. But sometimes, obviously, we don't live in a perfect world. John, any what's maybe surprised you, or any lessons learned from just working with customers and starting to really tinker and test with DFR and counter UAS within the past year, or anything coming up that you're excited about?
I think what I'm excited about is what I kind of mentioned before, is where drones were used to be considered a toy, now they're considered a tool, and there's a lot of adoption, or at least a lot of interest, that has really started to bubble up in terms of maybe adding drone technology to an agency, or even an enterprise company. I mean, we work with data centers and other critical infrastructure operators that are actually using these drones now for on-site security, perimeter security. They're also using it so it doesn't necessarily relate to DFR, but as far as drone technology, when it comes to EHS, which is environmental health and safety, drones are being used now either in critical infrastructure or just in the enterprise alone to be able to understand the integrity of, let's say, an HVAC system or a diesel generator or the roof of a building, and being able to not displace people, but prevent people from getting into situations that could potentially be harmful to them, being on a ladder, being on a roof, or in situations where it's difficult to maybe move around, or just poses a inherent safety risk. And so drones are being used in Matt and we have a visitor that's going to be coming to the village that is one of the largest on-site security providers in the world, because they are now realizing that this is drone technology can really help enhance their security programs to their customers, so that they're not only providing security to these enterprise and critical infrastructure organizations by boots on the ground and circling the perimeter or the premises with a car, but now they're being able to send drones up, be able to get that situational awareness or that awareness of the area and what's going on that they didn't have before, because they were only relying on terrestrial navigation, if you will. But now they're being used, the drones are being used to augment these security programs. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to have this company come in. It's especially gratifying for me to our partnership with Skyfire, because now we have this, as Matt mentioned, a 2,200 acre facility that basically you can see this technology firsthand, fly this technology, and understand what's best, for your organization. But in regards to DFR, I'm seeing DFR not only in the public safety space, but also these DFR platforms being utilized in other areas, oil and gas being one of them, where, pipeline inspections, either, at a moment's notice or just on a regular cadence, be able to send these drones out fairly automated to do these missions to check the integrity of the pipelines and making sure that everything is according to plan. So, DFR is, public safety is just one aspect of DFR, but these drones can be first responders in other areas as well. And that's what we're seeing.
So then obviously there's all these nuances, as you both have mentioned, within how drones are being used and how we're defending against drones. There's one other nuance here I wanted to get to before I kind of have a closing question. But again, the term BVLOS is one that I've heard a few times. And it's sort of like, again, this next line of before it was always, hey, 400 feet below, and you need to have eyes on the bird. But it seems like there's been more and more BVLOS licenses applied for and acquired. But Matt, you've mentioned a few times kind of the dynamic of working with the FAA, and I know Mike O'Shea, who is one that I've a close contact there. I think he's now no longer with the FAA, but he's been a huge proponent in working with public safety to kind of get the right verbiage and just continue to be an advocate. But this whole BVLOS conversation and the evolving policy conversation and the standards and best practices, I'd love to hear both your take on just kind of like how the standards are shaping how the standards and policies are shaping with FAA, and in particular with BVLOS, which seems to be a growing topic of interest.
Yeah, it's changing regularly. So depending on when this releases, everything I'm saying might be completely obsolete, even if it's tomorrow when you release this. That's definitely a good and a bad thing. We're trying to keep up. But I think the good news is that, the FAA has been an incredible partner in all this. They understand, largely in part thanks to Mike O'Shea, because Mike came from the Department of Justice. So he definitely gets what we do. But they understand what we're trying to do. They understand that we're trying to do it safely. And so they're trying to find ways within current legislation and within current laws to help us do what we need to do better. So go beyond line of sight. We in Chula Vista, when they first started, they were able to go 3 miles beyond line of sight with an observer on the roof. Then once it got out of that sort of testing phase, everybody sort of agreed that 2 miles was the right number. 3 was a little bit too far. So we've had 2 miles, for several years now, had the ability to go 2 miles. Those rules are changing a little bit now, and they're getting a little bit more lenient in some ways and more restrictive in others. And things like, if we're going to fly over people, we need to have parachutes on the drones and things like that. So there's a lot of little nuance there. If you're not familiar with drone responders as an organization, Charles Werner does a great job with that group. It's free, it's nonprofit, it's basically an information sharing platform. And so Charles has been really pushing for a lot of this change as well. So that's been really cool. I say that all of it is changing because literally within the next couple of weeks, there should be a notice of proposed rulemaking coming from the administration about what's called Part 108. So right now we're doing most of our operations under Part 107. Part 108 is going to be the next iteration of this. And so the what they call the BVLOS ARC, the BVLOS, which is beyond visual line of sight, ARC is the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, had a bunch of suggestions about it. We really need to like codify this into law so that we're not reinventing the wheel every single time. Here's how we think you should do that. So that those BVLOS ARC recommendations came out, it's like 3 years ago now. They're finally getting codified into a law. We almost got this rulemaking published before the change of administration. And then because of the change of administration, everything slows down for a couple months. It sounds like that rulemaking is going to happen in the next month. Once it does, the public has the opportunity to comment on it. So that's where we're very excited about. I actually have even been invited into this room, but I'm briefing some folks at the White House tomorrow on the BVLOS recommendations and this rule moving forward. Like I said, I think it'll allow us to put this into law. That way every agency knows, okay, this is the path I got to follow, instead of like, well, can I do this? Maybe, I don't know. Let's try. How about this? Maybe, I don't know. Let's give it a shot and see what happens, which is how we're doing it now. So that's really exciting stuff. I think it's really going to change the drone industry, not just DFR, but I mean, the reason that Amazon and Walmart and, all those folks are not flying around everywhere delivering packages is because of these line of sight rules. And so once we have a better pathway to that, I think you're going to see the drone industry, really burgeon into what it's always promised to be.
I'm gonna have to get your autograph after you go speak at the White House.
This is like my 4th time, dude. You're too late. And like my autographs cost money now.
Oh gosh. I'm gonna have to find a little kid to come up to you and tap you on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, mister, please."
I like it. Man, I'm famous in my very tiny little circle of like 12 people.
John, what else from a BVLOS conversation, and then again, Darley's intertwined role with that, or your thoughts in terms of the policy evolution? What's your take on that?
So I guess what I would say is Darley partners with really best-in-class organizations that provide leading-edge technology, both hardware, software, and services. And so in my conversations with public safety agencies, BVLOS always comes up. And Darley's the expert in the hardware and the software, but when it comes to legislation and rules and regulations, we try to educate our customers as much as possible, but it can be complex. And being able to communicate the right information and provide the right path to, let's say, getting BVLOS waivers, it's really important that we partner with experts that do this day in and day out. And that's where Skyfire and DFR Village come in. So rather than trying to be kind of mediocre at 10 things, I'm always of the opinion that I'd rather be excellent at a few things and then rely on partners who have the expertise to help, guide these agencies on their journey or their path to, gaining BVLOS waivers and being able to be trained in that area. And again, that's where we rely on Skyfire because they've been doing it for so long. They really have their finger on the pulse of the rules and regulations and the legislation that's coming down. And so while I have these conversations with my customers, when it really gets to a point where, okay, this is what we want to do, how do we do it? What are the steps? And how can we get educated on this? That's when we call in Skyfire and DFR Village to help those agencies. Because what we want to do is we want to provide, again, the best quality hardware, software, and services. And so, again, that's where our partnership with Skyfire comes in, is to provide our customers reliable information and really best-in-class training for BVLOS waivers and what to do about that, but also other types of training as well that relate to aviation and particular drone technology.
And to kind of build on that partnership and the alignment with Skyfire conversation, and to kind of wrap us up here, how can public safety agencies or commercial partners, other businesses that are bringing different technologies to the drone world, get involved with Rise, and what should they expect from their first visit, and how to kind of get involved with the whole training and just join the ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can always go to skyfireai.com. You can go to dfrvillage.com. John, I'll let you give the Darley ones as well, too, so I don't screw it up. But, reach out to us, right? I mean, one of the things, and Kevin, you've heard me say this a million times, we don't charge you unless you buy something. And so if you want to talk to any of us at Skyfire, just send us an email. We'll happily get on the phone, go through your requirements, go through your airspace, and just say, hey, here's what we think would be great. I mean, I think, the biggest value that I can bring to the conversation, to any conversation, is just to give you the true and honest read on what's what and who's doing what. Drone out there is bad. No drone out there is the best, right? They're all just like we talked about early on. It's all about the tool that you need for the job. So let me help walk you through that, right? I mean, there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So we're trying to show people that, like, if it's at the Village, it works, right? We're not going to have anything at the Village that is smoke and mirrors. So come out, put your hands on it. Like I said, just email us, reach out to me on LinkedIn. You might have to get in line if you want an autograph. Otherwise, I'm pretty easy to find. And we can walk you through all that stuff, because it is complicated. It does change. I mean, we were sort of joking about this yesterday. You guys are familiar with Bruce, who works in my organization. I talked to a client, gave them some information. He's like, dude, you gave them the wrong information. I'm like, man, when did that change? He's like, oh, last week. And I'm like, okay. And this is exactly why we do what we do. I'm like, I told him, I said, look, I'll tell you what I know, and then I'll hand you off to the actual expert. So it's like a Russian nesting doll, the expert within the group of experts. Bruce is our FAA guy. He knows it all. So, but Mike Rogers, who's on our team, our senior vice president of public safety. I mean, he built and ran the FBI's drone team. This guy has forgotten more about public safety drones than all of us will ever know. And we have other experts from, defense and intelligence and fire rescue and all that. So, we will definitely put you on the phone with the right person, get you the answers that you need, and then let you make the decision. And like I said, if you want to buy something, we'll charge you for it. But until then, we're here to talk. We're here to help you out. And we wanted this. It was critical that experience at the Village be free as well, too, because we don't want you to feel like we're trying to sell you something that you don't need. We're trying to help you buy whatever it is you do need.
Well said, Matt. And John, to kind of wrap this up here too, of ways that public safety agencies can get involved with Darley and the whole DFR conversation, or other businesses that are kind of looking for some of the Darley marketing, distribution, brand eminence. What else would you add to that?
So currently we're working on, and we're just about done, but we're working on a dedicated Darley drone webpage within darley.com. And this is really going to provide a lot of information, not just about the drones that we provide, but also help you to walk through basically taking a quiz or providing a questionnaire so that you can kind of choose what's most important to you. Once you go through that quiz or those questions, then we can, based on your requirements and based on how you answer those questions, we'll be able to recommend different drone platforms that'll meet your particular requirements. That's one way. That website should be up and running in about 3 weeks. You can always reach it at darley.com, and then you'll be able to navigate to the dedicated drone webpage. One of the things that the reason why our partnership with Skyfire and DFR Village, I think, is so good is because we don't look at things as making a sale. It's building a relationship. Right. We're not interested in, as Matt said, we're not interested in selling you anything. Although, I mean, obviously, when we sell things, that helps keeps the light on and pay the bills. But at the end of the day, what we're looking to do is build relationships with these agencies so that, we can stand shoulder to shoulder with them and they can lean on us because, we are the experts. They're not, but they know exactly what they need. They just don't know where to get it, or maybe they don't know what they need, and they need some guidance. And it's the old, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, speak or listen twice as much as you speak, right? And that's what we try to do. We try to uncover what these requirements are and what's going to get these agencies to their goal. So it's important that we develop this relationship, and that's what Darley's all about. That's what Skyfire and DFR Village are all about, is building these relationships and thinking long term, right? And so that's the posture, that's the position that we take in all of our endeavors and all of our engagements with agencies.
Well, John and Matt, you both are good men. It's been a pleasure to work alongside of you. But Matt, I remember the first time I think we met, it must have been at like a NFPA conference in like 2014, and we were like walking in the rain somewhere and cracking jokes. And I was like, I think we'll be friends with this guy. And then John, in the last 2 years or so, with getting to know you, I just admire both your craft and really appreciate what you're working on. And I guess final thing, is there any words of wisdom or a quote that either of you live by? This is sort of a wild card I'm throwing to you before we close out here. Doesn't even have to be drone related. It could be sports related, it could be life related. Anything that comes to mind of a quote or words of wisdom or something you could leave us with here today?
Well, I like John's of listen twice as much as you speak. That was a pretty good one. He teed that up nicely. The one that I've been stuck on lately is that the electric light bulb was not a result of constant iteration on the candle. And what that means as far as what we do here is that, everybody's just trying to take what already exists and make it just a little better, just a little bit better, and a little bit better. And what I'm looking for, and what John's looking for in the drone space, is people who are just they're saying, look, we got to do something totally different, right? And so there's a couple of companies in particular. I think Skyfire, which is one that you guys just started working with. We've been talking to them for a long time, who just kind of came out of stealth a couple of weeks ago and just said, hey, here's something you've never seen before. And I think that's where the real innovation is going to come. Everybody is trying to take DJI built this market, right? Like there's no denying that. They build it, and you stand there with a remote and look up at a drone, and everybody's trying to make the drone just a little longer duration or a little faster, or make the experience just a tiny bit better. And Sci-Fly is like, forget all that. We're doing something totally different. Our thing flies for 3 hours. And we hope you'll never stand there with a remote and fly it. That's the kind of stuff that I think is so cool about this industry. So we can keep iterating on the candle, and we will, but the electric light bulb is what we're really looking for.
Love that. John, besides the 2 ears, one mouth comment, anything else that resonates with you and the John ethos?
It doesn't necessarily relate to drones. It relates to kind of, life and my approach, I guess, to things is that, find solutions, not excuses, so I'm always a guy that's, the glass is half full anyway. So I'm always of the opinion that, we should try as hard as we can to find solutions to particular situations, whether it's in the drone world or whether it's in your personal world or just business in general. Don't look for excuses, find solutions. And, if you look hard enough and if you're smart enough to kind of, or be resourceful enough, you'll find those solutions. But at the end of the day, if there aren't any solutions, you won't have to look back and say, hey, I should have thought of that, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. Think about those things up front and find those solutions, and don't rely on just making excuses because you can't do something. There's always reasons why we can't do something. They're legitimate reasons, but try to find those solutions first before you jump to an excuse for not being able to do something. So yeah, if that's helpful, great. If not, that's the only thing I can come up with, but that's something I've always thought about.
Double mic drop right there. Thank you both. Appreciate it. So Matt, we'll let you get back to your little beach vacay before you head off to the White House tomorrow. And John, you'll sit there and ponder this weekend. Are you really an Alabama fan, or are you an Auburn fan, or which way are you going to go? I don't know.
I tend to gravitate towards Auburn just because there's my Boston accent. Auburn, because I know it irritates my neighbors that have the big A on the side of their house.
I know,
but I couldn't tell you who the quarterback was for Auburn. I just do that to kind of, poke them in the eye.
Just to make people mad.
Yeah.
I always just love rewatching the epic Iron Bowl, the 109-yard kick six return. That was just epic. Not for all Alabama fans, but
whatever you do, just don't say you're a Georgia fan, because then they'll kick you out of the state.
Yeah.
I'm a Wisconsin Badger fan.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you're welcome anytime then. You're not a threat to us. So.
Yeah. So, right on, guys. All right. Well, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day and weekend ahead, and we'll talk soon.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks,
Always
Kevin.
a pleasure.